Hello, my name is Carl Niji and I am the owner-operator of a business called Overcoming Dyslexia, ADD, ADHD and Learning Disabilities in Ottawa, Canada. I'm what's known as a Davis Dyslexia facilitator, and I am also dyslexic myself. I've been asked today to make a short video about why I became a Davis facilitator and my journey as a dyslexic person. That in one way is a very big question and a very long answer, but I will do my best to really keep it as short as possible. My earliest memories of being dyslexic are about 10 years old, just really realizing for the first time that I couldn't actually do what adults were asking me to do, however hard I tried. I have other memories younger, but they're more fractured and they sort of come in, it's sort of more as pictures in my thinking. I remember one of about 8 years old around maths, and I just couldn't understand what my mother was trying to teach me about maths and adding. And her being very angry and very upset that I couldn't understand how you don't add, how could you not add 3 and 7, how you put them together, and me looking at those two shapes and going, well, those two shapes don't go together, and her saying, so don't be silly. So I have memories going back younger, but about 10 is when I really realized that I couldn't do what adults wanted me to do, and all these other kids could. That, if you fast forward a little bit more, my mother tells me a story of me going to her with books as we were packing up a bookshelf, and saying, God, I really wish I could read these books, and her being really upset because there was so much sort of longing in my voice. My mother did try very hard. I had 3 tutors. I remember most of them getting angry with me eventually, which was really the thing that puzzled me, that eventually it didn't matter how hard I tried, people always just seemed to get really angry with me in the end, and I just became like, why are they getting so angry? I'm trying hard. I had 3 tutors. I think the youngest one was about 10. My mother had a degree in English literatures and was actually a school teacher for a while. So it wasn't that people weren't trying around me. In fact, people were actually trying incredibly hard. But it just wasn't sticking, it wasn't working. Now, I'm 52, so we're talking 40 years ago. 40 years ago, there weren't the psychological educational assessments that we have now. My mum tried taking me to a psychiatrist to get me tested for dyslexia, but the results that came back just terrified her, to be honest, and they were very upsetting for her, because they weren't what they are today. They were very crude. And I basically got told by a psychiatrist that I was lazy and I should go away and read a book. But for me, I was becoming more inquisitive as to why I couldn't do this thing that everyone else said was really easy, but for me it was very, very hard. That really met its zenith when I was about 14. And I was in school and I almost got expelled for having an argument with a teacher when a teacher was saying to me, come on, Carl, pay attention, concentrate. And at this point, was really fed up, and I had been doing a lot of repetitive phonetical drilling in school. I think I was doing 2 or 3 hours a week where I had to listen through headphones to the words on the page. Someone would say them and I would repeat them forwards and backwards. And they were now what I understand as what we call trigger words on the Davis program. And I would do it relentlessly for 2 years, 2 or 3 times a week. And I was just getting more and more angry that it wasn't working. So when a teacher eventually, and of course I was being accused all the time of not concentrating, not trying hard enough, not paying attention. So when a teacher turned around and said, come on, Carl, pay attention, focus, I rounded on her at sort of age 14 and just said, look, you tell me how you pay attention and I'll do it the way you do it, and then I'll be able to bloody well read, pardon my language, but it was a lot stronger language than that. And I remember really the look on her face more than the dialogue, but there was this stunned look on her face where she realized that, and I realized that she could not teach me the thing I needed. I realized in that moment, and I think she did as well, that I did not need to know about history, I did not need to know about geography, I did not need to know maths, I did not need to know whatever subject we were studying. What I needed to know was how to concentrate my thinking, because my thinking didn't work like everybody else's. And we both realized in that moment that she could not show me how she concentrated. And if she didn't know how she did it, then how could she expect me to do it? And that really was a turning point for me. And that's, I think, really realistically when I gave up in school. I was about 14, got in a lot of trouble. I pushed back on it. I got very argumentative and I got a detention. Of course, I didn't turn up. At that point, detentions were a regular occurrence for me because I was never finishing my work and I couldn't do my homework, and I just gave up. I was about 14. I spent the last 2 years in school basically illiterate and not being able to do the work. And it was literally like a day prison for me is what it felt like. Emotionally and mentally, it became extremely hard. I became very depressed. I think I started smoking when I was sort of 14, experimented with things like alcohol and all sorts of other things as well. And I was really beginning to get sort of, it was a parent's worst nightmare, in effect, was beginning to play out. So I left school at 16. The day I turned school, I just ran out of the school gates. I just didn't want anything more to do with it. And I went to work. I started working in construction to begin with, and I started working with carpenters and plumbers, and I realized I was actually good with my hands. And eventually, sort of several years later, I found myself back in college at the age of 21, training as a furniture maker. And it was actually then, when I was 22, that I found out I was dyslexic for the first time. One of my instructors came to me when I was in college and said, "Look, Carl, if you don't get a piece of paper saying you're dyslexic, you're going to fail this program because you can't do the paperwork side of it. You can't do the reading and the writing, and it's showing up in your assignments that you're handing in." So I got tested, and it was very hard to find somebody to test me. Eventually I found somebody, and they said, "Yes, Carl, you are profoundly dyslexic." And so much so, I was also had dyscalculia, dysphasia, dyspraxia, dysgraphia. So I had a whole range of difficulties. I couldn't even remember my own telephone number. I used to carry it around and people's telephone numbers in my wallet, and I couldn't remember my own, so I had to keep it in my wallet. So for me, at the age of 22, I suddenly realized that I was dyslexic, and I had this name, I had this label, and I thought, well, what is it? And I started to ask questions about it. So I was both very happy because I had a name that I could then go and investigate, but I was also extremely angry because of the way I'd been treated as somebody who was dyslexic. And it was my childhood, it was not good when it came to the educational side of things. And that was not for want of trying and for people trying. But now I was an adult, and now I sort of really wanted to learn to read even more so, because it became even more about my future, my life. I had a career that I wanted, and I was more and more realizing that I had to do it. As a child, you can be accused of sort of not wanting it, not trying hard enough, not focusing, playing up, wanting to play with Lego instead of learn how to spell words. And yes, it is all very boring when you're a child and you can't do it. However, as an adult, when you're trying very, very hard to obtain a 3-year college course, and you're staying up at 2 or 3 in the morning, and you're really trying hard to read and decipher what's on the page, and all these methods you've been shown, which are largely phonetical methods, aren't working for you, you start really searching your own thinking, and that's what I started to do. So for me, really, dyslexia got divided into 2 parts. There's this one part that we talk about is literacy and the mechanics of reading and writing and all the rules and the idiosyncrasies of the English language, which we try to sort of force into people's heads, okay? And if you can't do it simply and easily, then that's the only method we have, it seems, is really trying to force it in with repetitive drill. And then there's this other aspect, which is my mind and my thinking. And since dyslexia is a disorder of the mind, every time I went to somebody in education and said, well, what is this disorder and how does it work and what's going on, they would say, well, we don't really know, and they give me a textbook answer. And every time I went to medicine or psychiatry or neurology and said, what's going on? The answer there stops quite quickly as well. And the answer is, if you go to a neurologist, which I've done and talked to neurologists, they will say, well, we don't really know what is causing these disorders, dyslexia, ADD, ADHD, whichever disorder you have. The old model is that it's damage, and that comes from about 100 years ago. The new model, the new understanding is that it's just difference, but we don't know what's causing that difference. So as an adult, I went to try and find out this other side, which was the mind. And for me, that boiled down to, well, what is causing these dyslexic moments that I'm having? Why are the letters going fuzzy? Why am I misreading this word? And I really sort of wanted to find the secrets of my dyslexia, as it were. So I went on this mission and I just looked at everything to do with my mind and everything to do with consciousness and mind. It didn't matter how weird, how wacky, how out there it was, I would give it a go. And I tried everything. At the same time, I was also trying to learn to read, and I was trying different methods. And every sort of few years, I dig down into some new phonics method that would help me learn to read. And my reading was getting better. And looking back now, what I realized is my reading wasn't actually getting better. I was getting older is what was happening. And as my brain was maturing and my brain was going from a child's brain to an adult's brain, it looked like my reading was getting better. But actually what was happening is I was getting older. But I still couldn't read as at adult level, a university level. So when I eventually at the age of 40, after trying all sorts of things, and I mean really legitimate things as well, so trying to understand psychotherapy, trying to understand psychiatry, trying to understand neurology, I would look at any article, newspaper article, documentary, book, anything that gave me insights. I would interview people. I interviewed dyslexics, anything and everything that would give me insights into my dyslexia and my learning difficulties. Well, eventually at about the age 40, I found a Davis facilitator. And when I sat down with a Davis facilitator for the first time, I asked her the three questions that I'd asked everybody who tried to help me. And the question I used to ask first of all is this phonics? And by the time of 40, if they said yes, I was done. That was it. Strike one, done. I'm not doing it anymore. The next question was, are you dyslexic? And if they said yes or no, if it was a no, that I was pretty much done. And the last one was, what is causing dyslexia? What is it? So when I sat down with a Davis facilitator for the first time and I said, asked her those three questions, she said, well, I'm not dyslexic, but the man who invented the program is. No, this is not phonics. It's different from phonics. And when I said, well, what is the cause of dyslexia? She said, well, all of the symptoms of dyslexia are actually the symptoms of somebody who's become disoriented. And I realized that she, and by extension Ron, when I looked at what Ron was saying, and I looked at videos by Ron, and eventually I read his book, what I realized is Ron was really talking about my dyslexia from the point of view of somebody who has dyslexia, and what was going on in my thinking and how my mind worked. And when I look back now, I realize that we have very well-meaning, kind, intelligent, well-educated people who are trying to help people with their dyslexia, but 90% of them are not dyslexic. And so that's, people are trying to give advice on a problem when they don't have that problem themselves. They're not experiencing what I am experiencing. And not to be glib, but this is a little bit like me trying to advise women on what works best for pregnancy. I can't get pregnant, I can't give birth, I don't have very much, right? So, and I don't mean to be flippant, but that's what it was like. So really the reason I became a Davis facilitator was because I didn't feel that I could stand by and let a child of 8, 9, 10 have the same experience that I have had as a dyslexic adult learning to read. And when we look at Ron's work, what we realize is that he has got to the root cause of dyslexia and many other language-based learning disabilities. In fact, his work goes far beyond dyslexia. He's also does work with autistic people as well. So this is a little bit longer than I think was wanted. So I'll wrap it up now by basically saying, for me as somebody who was severely dyslexic and has been chasing my dyslexia all of my life and really gone down the rabbit hole of my own dyslexia and learning difficulties, it's not what we think it is. The root cause is something really very good, very positive, that really works for many things. It just doesn't work for this thing that we call literacy. So I became a Davis facilitator so I could help others so they don't have to have the same kind of difficulties that I was having. So if you are thinking about doing a Davis program, I strongly recommend you do. I think that's it for now. Sorry it's longer than I was asked to do, but it's a very big question and I was trying to pack it down. Bye for now.